All right, so you guys wanted us to really dig into this one, and we heard you. Today, we are talking about the impact of steroid cycles on your cholesterol and lipids. And, we all know this is kind of like a big deal when it comes to potential health impacts, especially for your heart.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, cardiovascular health is so crucial. And, you all sent in a ton of FAQs specifically about how steroid cycles can affect cholesterol and lipid profiles. We've gone through all of them, really try to pull out the most important information, and we're going to break it all down for you today.
So, what we're going to do in this deep dive is really extract the key takeaways from all of these questions that you've sent in. We're going to look at how steroid cycles, typically change your cholesterol levels. Which types of steroids seem to have the most impact? What are the mechanisms at play? Are these changes reversible? All those really good questions that you guys are interested in. We're going to look at lifestyle factors, potential countermeasures, long-term risks, and just give you all the information that you need to really make informed decisions.
Right, exactly. I mean, knowledge is power, right?
Exactly. So first off, let's just get right into it. What kinds of changes are we talking about here when someone goes through a steroid cycle? What happens to their cholesterol?
Well, what we see pretty consistently in the FAQs is that when people are using anabolic-androgenic steroids, AS, there's a tendency for their lipid panel to shift in, you know, not the best direction. HDL-C, the good cholesterol tends to go down, and then the LDL-C, the bad cholesterol, tends to go up.
Okay, so it's kind of like a double whammy, right? The good stuff goes down and the bad stuff goes up. But why is that such a big deal? Like, why is that shift so important?
Right, right. And that's the really important point. This shift in the ratio of HDL to LDL is what makes it atherogenic. So basically what that means is that it creates an environment in your arteries where it's easier for plaque to build up.
Mm.
Over time, that plaque hardens, your arteries narrow, and that really increases your risk of cardiovascular problems.
So it's not just about the numbers, right? It's
Mhm.
about what's actually happening inside your body.
Yeah, exactly. It sets the stage for future problems.
Now, are all steroids created equal in this regard? I mean, some are going to be harsher on cholesterol than others, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And a point that comes up a lot in the FAQs is that oral anabolic steroids, and specifically the ones that are 17-alpha alkylated, they tend to have a more pronounced negative effect on lipid profiles compared to injectables. And this is mainly because of the way that they are processed by the liver. You see, this alkylation process, it helps them survive that first pass through the liver, but it also means they interact more directly with the liver enzymes that handle fats.
That makes sense. So it's basically about how they hit the liver. What about the injectables then? Are they all good to go, or are there some nuances there as well?
Well, while they generally seem to have a less dramatic impact than the oral 17-alpha alkylated steroids, it doesn't mean they're completely off the hook. Some injectables, particularly the ones that are more strongly androgenic, meaning they have more masculinizing effects, those can also lead to some unfavorable changes in lipids. It's important to remember that it's not just the type of steroid, but also the dosage and the duration of use.
You're absolutely right. So we're talking about a complex interaction here, right? You've got the specific substance, how much you take, and for how long. Now, can we dig a little deeper into the actual biological mechanisms behind these changes? You mentioned it's complicated, but can we break it down a little bit?
Sure, sure. So the exact mechanisms are still being studied, but from what we see in the FAQs, there are a few key areas that steroids seem to affect. They appear to interfere with the hepatic lipase, which is an enzyme that helps to break down HDL-C, the good cholesterol. So that's one issue. Then they also seem to influence how the liver produces and secretes lipoproteins, which are the carriers of cholesterol in your blood.
Yeah.
And then, even more fundamentally, there's some evidence to suggest that steroids might actually affect the activity of genes that are involved in lipid metabolism.
Wow. So we're talking about messing with some pretty core processes here, right? Not just a simple on or off switch.
Exactly. And that's a part of it makes it so complex. Plus, each individual steroid can have a slightly different effect depending on its chemical structure, whether it's taken orally or injected, and how it's metabolized in the body. It's a lot of moving parts.
So for someone who has already been through a cycle, what's the prognosis? Can they bounce back from these cholesterol changes once they stop using steroids?
Well, the good news is, in many cases, the answer is yes. Based on what we're seeing in the FAQs, when people stop using steroids, HDL-C levels typically start to rise again, and LDL-C levels generally start to go back down, moving back towards their baseline.
That's good to hear. At least there's hope for recovery. But you did say in many cases. Does that mean there are times when things might not go back to normal?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's a possibility. The time it takes for things to normalize can vary a lot from person to person. It depends on the type of steroid, how much they used, the length of the cycle, and of course, individual differences in their physiology.
Yeah, everyone's body is a little bit different.
Right, and the FAQs suggest that if someone has been using steroids for a really long time or at very high doses, then those changes in their lipid profile might be more persistent, even after they stop. And it could potentially increase their long-term cardiovascular risk. It's like pushing your body to the limit for too long.
So recovery isn't guaranteed, and the stakes are pretty high. Now, for people who are really into fitness and health, they're often big on diet and exercise. Can those things help to counteract the negative effects of steroids on cholesterol?
That's a great question, and a common one in the FAQs. It is absolutely true that eating a heart-healthy diet and getting regular exercise are great for your overall cardiovascular health, and they can definitely have a positive impact on your baseline cholesterol levels. But the thing is, they can't fully erase the damage done by steroid use.
So you can't just eat your way out of this problem or exercise your way out of it.
Unfortunately not.
Yeah.
Think of it this way. You're trying to swim upstream against a strong current. Diet and exercise might give you a little bit of a boost, but they can't completely overcome the powerful effects that steroids have on your metabolism.
Right. So lifestyle changes are still important, but they're not a magic cure. Are there any other options out there, like medications or supplements that people might use to manage their lipids while they're on a cycle?
Well, some of the FAQs mention that people might try things like omega-3 fatty acids or cholesterol-lowering drugs. But there's really not enough research to say for sure if these things are effective or safe when used alongside steroids.
So it's kind of risky and uncharted territory.
Exactly. It's really not something to experiment with on your own. The FAQs really emphasize that if you're considering anything like this, you absolutely need to talk to a doctor and be closely monitored. You don't want to create even more problems.
That makes a lot of sense. Now let's zoom out a bit and think about the bigger picture. What are the potential long-term consequences for your heart health if you're constantly messing with your cholesterol levels through steroid use?
Well, the FAQs make it pretty clear that repeatedly going through steroid cycles and having those ups and downs in your lipids can significantly increase your risk of developing serious cardiovascular diseases later in life. We're talking about things like atherosclerosis, hypertension, heart attacks, strokes, and other heart-related problems.
Wow, that's a pretty sobering list.
It really is.
Yeah.
And it all comes down to the cumulative effect of these repeated insults to your cardiovascular system. Every time you disrupt that delicate balance in your lipid profile, you're potentially contributing to a problem that might not show up until years down the line.
So it's not just about the immediate effects, it's about setting yourself up for trouble in the future.
Right. It's like slowly chipping away at the foundation of your health.
So if someone is really serious about protecting their heart and keeping their cholesterol in check, what's the bottom line message here? What should they take away from all of this information?
Well, the FAQs are pretty consistent in their recommendation. If you are concerned about your long-term cardiovascular health and want to maintain a healthy lipid profile, the best course of action is to avoid anabolic steroid cycles altogether.
It sounds like the risks are just too high.
Right. Especially when you consider that there are other, safer ways to achieve your fitness goals. It's always best to talk to a healthcare professional about those options.
Before we continue, if you are interested in more topics like this, or you want to order stacks, you can do so by visiting publichealthlaw.best website. So visit publichealthlaw.best to get your bulking, cutting, and strength stacks for maximum results.
That's right. You can find lots of helpful information and resources there.
So just to recap, what are the key things to remember about steroid cycles and their impact on cholesterol?
Sure. So the main takeaway is that steroids tend to disrupt your cholesterol balance, lowering the good HDL and raising the bad LDL. Oral steroids, particularly the 17 alpha-alkylated ones, seem to have a stronger negative effect than injectables. And while these changes are often reversible after stopping steroid use, they do come with some serious long-term risks for your heart. And lastly, even if you're super healthy with your diet and exercise, you can't completely negate the impact of steroids on your metabolism.
So in a nutshell, it's a big gamble with your cardiovascular health. Not really worth it in the long run.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder, if steroids can have such a profound effect on something as fundamental as your lipid profile and heart health, what other seemingly unrelated systems in your body might be affected in ways that we don't even fully understand yet? It's a pretty thought-provoking question.
Yeah, absolutely. It really highlights the interconnectedness of everything in our bodies and the potential for unintended consequences when we interfere with those complex systems.
And just a final reminder, if you are interested in more topics like this or you want to order stacks, you can do so by visiting publichealthlaw.best website. So visit publichealthlaw.best to get your bulking, cutting, and strength stacks for maximum results.
All right, folks, that's all we have for you today. Stay informed and stay healthy.
Disclaimer, the content of our podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only.